Painting a magic vase is easier than you think, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do it no matter your skill level. Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos and so that you can join our wonderful creative community. And with that said, grab your drawing tools and let's get started. Now just a quick note before we start. In this video, I'm going to be working in an app called Procreate on the iPad Pro, but you can really follow along with any digital art software of your choice. This is going to be more of a painterly style kind of tutorial. So we're mostly going to be working with blending modes in this video, which is something accessible in pretty much any software. So whatever you have, you should be good to follow. So the first thing we're going to do here is set our background to a dark color. So I'm just going to hide my example real quick here. And then go ahead and select the background layer that is automatically created with any Procreate canvas. Now in this video, I'm going to use colors from my Berries color palette, which you can download for free. It is part of my free Procreate Jumpstart kit. So if you want, go ahead, pause the video here, check out the link in the description below, and then come back once you have it downloaded. But otherwise, feel free to pick your own colors. This is a video that you can easily customize, and I'm going to give you tips on how to change things to, personalize your piece. And honestly here, as long as you have a dark color, that's really all that matters. So in my case, I'm going to start with this dark purpley blue as my base, right here in the color palette. And then I'm going to make it quite a bit darker, and I'm also going to desaturate it. So something a little bit like this. And from there, we're going to draw the basic shape of the vase. So go ahead and create a new layer, rename that new layer to Vase. And here you're just going to go with a very light desaturated version of your background color. So just sticking with the same hue you had, just making it super, super bright and quite desaturated, but not quite white. So in my case, I'm going to go with something like this. Doesn't need to be super precise. Now, like I mentioned in the intro here, I'm going to go with more of a painterly style, so I'm just going to use one brush. You can really use whatever brush you're comfortable with. That could even just be a basic round brush. Now, if you're working with Procreate and you're working with free brushes, what I recommend going for is in the sketching pack, if I can find it. Where is it? There we go. Either the HP pencil or the 6B pencil, because I personally want to have a little bit of texture in my piece. If you don't really want to have texture, you could go with just, again, a hard round brush. That would work. If you're working in a different software that is not Procreate, again, any hard round brush could work, or just something with pencil and name is a good alternative as well. Now, I'm personally going to be working with my Everything brush, which is part of my Ultimate Illustration bundle, which if you want to check it out, it will be linked in the description below, and there's always a special promo code for the YouTube people, but it is really, really not essential. That being said, if you do have it, you can go ahead and pick the Everything brush as well. And here, all you're going to do is sketch the shape of the vase. But to make it a little bit easier, we might use what is called symmetry. So in the wrench icon menu, go ahead and open the Canvas submenu and activate the Drawing Guide toggle right here. And from there, go ahead and select Edit Drawing Guide. And you're going to pick the Symmetry option here on the bottom right. Now in my case, I can't see anything because my line is really dark, so I'm just going to go ahead at the top and pick a different color. I always find it really hard to do for some reason. There we go. I'm just going to set it to white. And you can see by picking symmetry, that's going to place a line, a vertical line in the middle of your canvas. If it is not a vertical line in the middle of the canvas, you can just use the green handle to rotate your guide and the blue handle to move it along until it is vertical in the middle of your screen. Now these options here at the bottom are just for the display. They're not going to affect the final result. But I'm just going to increase my opacity so you can see my guide in my example. But again, in your case, it doesn't really matter. As long as you have a vertical line, that's all that matters here. Then if you go ahead and click Done and you open your layer panel again, you're going to see that your vase layer is going to have this little assisted label. If it doesn't have assisted, make sure you go ahead and activate it manually. So you can just tap on the vase layer once and then select Drawing Assist in the list. And what that does essentially, it means that now whatever we draw on one side is going to be repeated on the other side. And by having that, it's going to be really easy to draw a nice vase because we could just go ahead, draw one side, and we know the other side is going to be really nice. So go ahead here and draw really any kind of shape of your choice. That's totally up to you. You could have a really thin, tall vase. You can have a bit of a shorter round vase like I am doing. You could have a funky shape like a heart or something, whatever you want here. And once you have a shape that you're happy with overall, go ahead and just drop your color to fill it in. And if you're using a brush that has texture, you're probably going to need to adjust the threshold. So when you drop your color, just keep your pencil on the screen and then move it towards the left to fill in less of the shape, or towards the right to fill in more of the shape. So the idea here is to find a moment right before the color fills in the entire canvas. So in my case, it's going to be here. And then if you have any other areas to fill in as well, you can just drop the color again, or manually fill in the areas. So feel free to pause the video here if you need more time to work on your vase shape. Otherwise, we're going to start adding some lights and shadows to make it look a little bit more like glass. At this stage, we can go ahead and deactivate drawing guides. And we're going to lower the opacity of our vase because right now it doesn't look like glass at all, and we just want the slightest little bit of that color. So go ahead and tap on the little N next to the check mark, and you're going to lower that opacity slider somewhere between 5 and 10%. Then go ahead and create a new layer on top of your vase layer and rename that layer to highlights. Now we want the highlights to be very bright and to kind of react to the different colors underneath, because they are going to be applied on glass, meaning the color of the highlight is going to be different if it is on top of the liquid or if it is on top of just the background. So to get that kind of blending effect and that pop effect, we're going to use a blending mode. So just like we did for the opacity of the layer, go ahead and tap on the little N next to the check mark on your highlights layer. And here, instead of playing with the opacity, go ahead and select Add. And now on the highlight layer, still with the same brush and still with the same color, we're going to go ahead and we're going to lightly trace around our vase. So just use a pretty small size of your brush. The exact size doesn't matter. You can just test a few things until you get something pretty fine and precise. And you're going to outline almost everything, focusing on what would be the corners. Mine is pretty round, but you still get the idea. Essentially, the bulging sides here. I'm still going to trace them, but I'm not going to press as hard on my pencil. So you can see essentially it's kind of like we were doing some very wonky line art. So we have an outline around the entire shape, but it's quite patchy. Now from there, we're also going to trace essentially what's going to be the opening. So that's going to depend on whatever shape you have for your bottle. But no matter what shape you have, you need to have an opening so that we can put the leaves and the branches later. Now the opening, make sure it is not kind of like this, because otherwise it makes it look like there's no thickness to the glass. So it's going to be more of an oval, which is going to let you see some of the thickness in the back. And again, here you don't want it to be uniform. You also want it to be a little bit splotchy. Now, depending again on the type of bottle, you might have a bit of a ridge at the top or a few ridges if it's kind of a screw cap. So you can just draw those lines as well if you want. Again, making sure they are fairly splotchy. Now from there, we're going to add more lights, but we're going to draw them on a separate layer because we might want to blend those lights later, and we wouldn't want to blend these highlights. We want those to stay crisp. So go ahead and create a new layer above the highlights, above the vase, above everything you have, and rename it just to lights. But same thing here, we're going to also pick the blending mode add so that those lights react to whatever is underneath in terms of color. But here we're going to lower the opacity probably around 50% to start with. And here you can increase the size of your brush a little bit. Again, nothing super precise. You want to have something that looks roughly like this size. We're going to draw highlights mostly on the side, but leaving a little bit of a gap between this outline that we just drew and the new light. So it's going to look a little bit like this. You can see here I'm tilting my pencil a little bit and I'm not pressing as hard because I do want to have some of that texture and that wispiness in the stroke. If you struggle with not pressing hard, or if you don't have a pencil that has pressure sensitivity, what you can do is just lower the opacity slider here. So probably around, I don't know, 40–50%. And that way your brush by default is not going to be fully opaque, even if you press super hard with your pencil. So that's always an option you have. But in my case, I have the Apple Pencil and my brushes are very sensitive to pressure. So as long as I don't press super hard, I'm going to be able to manually create that effect. So again, just starting by drawing these two sides, leaving a little bit of a gap on the edges. And then on the top left, we are going to extend the light so that it connects with the side like this. And on the bottom left, we're going to create a gradient towards the middle. So again, that's going to be another case of angling your pencil and then pressing lightly. Doesn't need to be perfect. At the end, we're going to come back and blend anything that doesn't look quite right, but for now we're just roughly placing the colors. Now we're also going to add a bit of a more intense, precise light situation on the right side. Here it's pretty light, but it's quite diffuse. On the right side, we're going to keep it a little bit more sharp. So we're going to add a highlight on the bottom right, kind of like this. And we're going to add a few large ovals on the top right. And again, this is something you can completely adapt to different bottle shapes. Just focus on the same quadrants and just apply the same technique. If your vase has this kind of bottle opening, we're also going to add a big highlight on the right like this. And maybe a little bit on the rings as well, always on the right side. Great. Now before we start adding the liquid, we're going to add a bit of shadows as well, just add a bit of contrast. So go ahead and create a new layer right above the base, so below the lights and the highlights. Rename that new layer to shadows. And here we're going to use a different blending mode because add makes the color look brighter, so that's not what we want. We want to make the colors look darker. So here we're going to use a linear burn. And we're also going to lower the opacity to 50 for now, or around 50, just so we can have a better idea of what we're doing, but we might play with it later as well. And here for your shadows, you're going to go back to the color you use on the background and make it pretty much mellow away, both in terms of saturation and brightness. Now, if you're using my berries color palette, we could all go and select this one right here, just so we're all working with exactly the same color. But otherwise, again, just quickly color pick and just make it brighter and more saturated. Really doesn't need to be super precise. Now those shadows, we're going to focus them mostly in the little gap we have between the highlights and the light. And just like we did for the lights, we're going to press not super hard, so medium pressure. And we might go ahead and tilt the pencil as well. Doing the same thing on the neck and the opening, depending on your bottle, of course. And we might add a little bit at the bottom and in the middle, So just kind of an oval towards the bottom like this. And then just gently bringing it upwards. You can see again, I'm not being precise in any way. We're just kind of roughly painting everything at this point. Great, so we're going to leave the glass like this for now. We're going to come back to it later, but before we spend more time on it, we're going to start adding the liquid just so we have a better idea of what we're working with. So go ahead and create a new layer above the vase, but below any light and shadow you might have, and rename that new layer to liquid. Now here you can have really any color liquid of your choice. That is totally up to you. I recommend going with something quite saturated and bright. Now in my case, I'm going to start with this purple right here in the color palette, which you can see is really quite bright and quite a bit saturated as well. And here again, same brush, but maybe a little bit smaller because we're going to sketch. We're going to go ahead and draw the top shape of the liquid. So here, if you wanted, you could have just a straight line. I want mine to look a little bit more magical, kind of like it's moving in the vase even though nothing is happening. So I'm going to draw an infinity sign. Now, no matter what shape you are drawing for the top of the liquid, make sure it doesn't touch the sides of the vase because again, the vase has some thickness. So just leave a little bit of a gap. And then you're just going to draw the bottom so that we can then fill in the shape. Again, making sure you leave a gap between the edge of the liquid and the edge of the bottle. And with that, it is time for the secret password. So if you've watched this far in the video, please go ahead and let me know in the comments below which color you're using for your liquid. And if you're not familiar with the secret password, it's a game that we play here on the channel. In all of my long form tutorials, I had a secret password for you to find and leave as a comment. And that does a few things. The most important one being that it gives me some insight into how to edit and pace my videos better. And that helps me create better tutorials for you. So again, if you watch this far, just leave me a comment with whatever color you're using for your liquid, and then we're going to keep going. And here, if you only have a flat line, you can fill the entire shape with your liquid color. In my case, I'm going to leave one of the sides or one of the loops not filled. And then I'm going to come back with a darker version of that color, a little bit more saturated as well. And then I'm going to fill that side. Now, if you wanted here, you could have just one color for your liquid. That's totally fine. But to make it even more magical, we're going to add a gradient within the liquid. So go ahead and grab any selection tool you may have, setting it to freehand, and then draw a shape that matches the top of your liquid. So in my case, this kind of wave. And select the bottom part of your liquid. We're then going to feather this section, probably between 20 and 40%. You can really experiment with different numbers here. The more you feather, the softer the gradient is going to be, and the less you feather, the harsher the line is going to be. Now, still with that selection activated, go ahead and pick really any kind of color adjustment tool you have in your software. So in Procreate, if you open up the adjustment panel here at the top, you're going to see we have a few. I really like to use hue, saturation, brightness, which is available in most software, but you could use something like color balance, curves. That would all work really well as long as you're able to change the color of a selection. That's really all you need. So again, here I'm going to use hue, saturation, and brightness. And then you can just play with the sliders and change the color as desired. So I'm going to shift my hue towards the right to make it a little bit more pink. You can play with the saturation as well. I think I'm going to keep mine like it was. You could play with the brightness. Again, I think I'm going to keep mine as it was. Now, the liquid in my mind is what is glowing in this piece. So to make it look like the liquid is glowing, we're going to add a bit of a highlight onto the liquid as well. So for that, you can just go ahead and color pick a part of your light that is overlapping with the liquid, just so you get a bright version of your liquid color, essentially. And then you're just going to trace the top part of the liquid. Now mine is not quite bright enough, so I'm just going to manually make it even brighter, but again, it's really nothing precise here. As long as you have something bright that is roughly in the same realm as your liquid, that's totally going to work. And to make it look like the liquid is transparent, we're also going to trace the original shape that we had, even though right now part of it is missing. So in my case, it was, again, this infinity sign. So I'm just going to complete the sign with my light color. And here you may want to draw the part that is in the front a little bit thicker and maybe even brighter. So just going back, making your color even brighter, and then just going over the front section again. Now to make the liquid even more magical and lively, I'm going to add some bubbles. So go ahead and create a new layer above the liquids, but still below any kind of light effect we have. Rename that new layer to bubbles. And we're going to use the same blending mode we used for the lights, so add. And we're probably going to set it to 50% for now as well. And then with the same bright color you used for the top of your liquid, go ahead and draw a few bubbles. You can draw some little dots, you can draw some O shapes, you can draw a combination of both. That's really totally up to you. You can even have some that are above the liquid, not a whole lot, but just a few to make it look even more magical. It's like the bubbles are so strong that they can go above the liquid and still be glowy. Now, since the liquid is glowing within the glass, we can imagine that the glass is going to have some reflection of the liquid. And right now the top is really blah. So go ahead and just color pick roughly in the middle of your liquid. Again, doesn't really matter much. And create a new layer above the liquid, above the bubbles, but below any light effect you have again. And just rename that to reflections. And here we're also going to use a blending mode. Like I told you here, we're mostly working with blending modes in this video because we're painting glass and liquid, so we want everything to interact together. And here you can really experiment with different blending modes. I think overlay or soft light would work really well. I'm going to start with overlay, just real quick, paint everything, and then come back and just see if there's another one that I prefer. And here, again, same brush, but we're going to go with a slightly bigger size. And we're just going to paint the top corners right inside of the light. So kind of like that. Now once you have it painted, again, you can just go back and honestly scroll through the list and see if there's something you prefer. Hard light could look really cool. It might be a little bit intense. I think hard light, but with lowered opacity is what I'm going to go with, but feel free to just scroll through the entire list and see if there's a blending mode that you like. Here, it's totally up to you. And I think I'm going to go back in and add a very precise version of that light along the edge of my vase, just to make it pop a little bit more. Now to make it look even more like the liquid is glowing, we are going to actually duplicate the liquid layer. So swiping it towards the left with one finger and then selecting duplicate. And we're going to change the blending mode of that copy to, let's go with color dodge for now. Again, we're going to play with it later. And we're going to essentially change that so it's not the sharp liquid anymore, but a glowy version of it. So go ahead and find any kind of blurring tool you have in your software. Often you're going to have an option called Gaussian blur. In Procreate, you can access Gaussian blur by tapping on the adjustment panel here at the top and selecting Gaussian blur in the menu. And then you can add as much or as little blur as you want, but as you can see, it's going to make it look like the liquid is glowing. So I'm probably going to keep mine around 40%. And then once you have the Gaussian blur, it's going to be a bit easier to see which blending mode you want to use. So just go ahead and scroll through the list and pick whatever blending mode looks good for your piece. Again, there's really no right or wrong answer here. I'm probably going to stick with color dodge in my case. Now before we add the plants and the vase, we're going to add a bit of, I guess, a reflection and a shadow on the ground, because right now it looks like the vase is floating. So go ahead and create a new layer below the vase, so below everything you have at this point. And rename that layer to Vase Reflection. It's kind of a combination of, yeah, reflection, lights, and shadow, because there's glow in the vase, there's a lot happening. And for that kind of light, shadow, reflection, whatever we want to call it, go ahead and color pick the color right above your liquid. So essentially it's going to be a mix of the background and the glow from your liquid. So just go ahead and color pick that. And then use that to just gently paint at the bottom of the vase. You can add a bit of a shadow just to make it look a little bit more interesting and magical. So just go ahead and select your eraser and then just set it to any kind of soft brush you have. So a round brush, no texture, but with feathered edges, something like that. And Procreate is in the airbrushing pack. And then with a fairly small to medium sized brush, you can just erase really close to the bottom of the vase. So essentially it's kind of like you're erasing to create a donut shape in your light. Now the last thing we're going to do before adding the branches is just adding some glowing dots outside of the vase. So go ahead and create a new layer above everything. Rename it to, I guess, glowing dots. Why not? We're also going to use the blending mode add. And we are going to go back to any bright color you have in your history at this point. Could probably work really well. I'm going to pick this bright pink right here, which was the one I used for the top of the liquid. And then you can draw little dots here and there. Now I feel like mine are a little bit too bright, so I'm going to lower my opacity, but you may want to keep yours opaque. That really depends on the effect that you want. Oh, and I almost forgot, because I'm really quite happy with the way my light and shadows are looking, but if you find like yours are a little bit too harsh, or if you find like they're too textury, like you can see my strokes here in these shadows, if you don't like that effect, you can just go back to any layer you're not super happy with. So in my case, for example, these shadows, and then use the smudge tool. So smudge tool in most software is just going to be a little finger icon like this. And then you can set that smudge tool to a really soft brush. So just a round brush that doesn't have any texture and that has some sort of feathering. And then with that, if you go over, you're going to be able to blend your shadow or light just so it's not as harsh. In my case, I'm going to keep it like it was because, again, I want this piece to be a bit more painterly, but if you want your piece to be a little bit softer, that's always an option that you have. And the last thing we're going to do here is we're going to add some plants in the vase. So go ahead and create a new layer above anything that relates to the vase or the liquid, but below anything that is kind of lights and shadows. So in my case, it's going to be right below the reflections and above the bubble. And we're going to rename this new layer to, I'm just going to start with a few branches, and then I'm going to add some leaves on a separate layer. So new layer, renaming that to branches. And same thing here, you can really go with any color of your choice. I'm going to stick with kind of moody blues, and I'm actually going to stick with the same kind of color I use for my background. So in the color palette, I'm going to go with this one right here. And then I'm just going to draw 3 of these kind of branch shapes. So quite thin at the bottom and the part that would be in the liquid, but then it gets kind of thicker and rounder towards the top. So 3 of those. And then you can either color drop to fill in the shape, or you can fill it in manually. I'm going to fill it in manually because I want to have some texture within those shapes. So really quickly and quite loose. As it is right now, it looks like the branches are kind of above the liquid, which is not quite accurate. So going back to your eraser, you might lower the opacity here, it might make it a little bit easier. So yeah, lowering the opacity of your eraser probably around 50%. And you're just going to very gently erase the part of the branches that is in the liquid. Same thing here at the top, we have a bit of an issue because the branches are going through the opening of the bottle, so we shouldn't see these highlights here. So I'm just going to go back on my highlight layer right here and still with the eraser, but here with the eraser at 100%, I'm going to erase the overlapping highlight, so the highlight at the back, making sure that I keep the highlight in front obviously so that the bottle looks like it's actually going in front of the branches here. So I'm going to do essentially the same steps, but with a slightly different kind of branch. So feel free to do the same if you want. So for that, we're going to create a new layer above the branch layer, but still below any kind of reflection, shadow, light effects that we might have. And we're going to rename this new layer this time to leaves. Otherwise, same brush, same color. We're also going to start with this kind of branch shape at the bottom. But as we get outside of the vase, we're going to draw these oval shapes that are going to become leaves on either side of the branch. And then same thing, the part that is overlapping the liquid, we're going to gently erase. So you can lower the opacity of your eraser to make it a little bit easier. And here in my case, the branch is kind of cutting through the liquid. Here the liquid was clearly in front, but here the branch is going to be cutting again. So I'm going to start erasing kind of here. Otherwise, exact same thing as for these branches. Going back on the highlight layer, increasing the opacity of the eraser back to 100% so that it's a bit easier. And I'm also having this just regular light overlap here, so I'm going to go on the light layer as well and erase that too. So anything that is overlapping that you don't like here, essentially you just go ahead and erase, nothing more complicated than that. Now to make these branches look a little bit more coherent with the rest of the piece, we have this thing glowing at the bottom and now the branches are just one color. We're going to add a bit of a gradient within the branch. And for that, what you could do is just color pick the color of your branch, make it darker and more saturated. Then going on your branch layer and then just color the top while trying to stay within the branch shape. That could work, but to make it a little bit easier on ourselves, we're going to activate what is called alpha lock. And so for that, you can just swipe your layer towards the right with 2 fingers, or you can tap on your layer and select Alpha Lock from the menu. Now, Alpha Lock is available in most software, so if you're not sure where it is in yours, you can just Google it. And with Alpha Lock activated, it means that now everything we draw on the branch layer is going to stay within the branch shape that we already have. So we can make our brush quite a bit bigger, and then just brush the top of the branches to create this nice textured gradient. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other layer as well, so the leaves layer. So just swiping it towards the right with 2 fingers, and then just creating a soft gradient from the top to the bottom. Now if you don't have Alpha Lock in your software, it is not the biggest deal. You could use the same technique we used to create the color variation on the bottom part of the liquid. That's one option. Or you could just go ahead and draw like you would regularly, so just going to have to be a little bit more precise so that you stay within the lines. And the last little thing we're going to do here is add a few details on these branches. So go ahead and color pick a light section of your branch and make it quite a bit lighter. And then going back to a smaller version of your brush, you can go ahead and just add a few details. So personally, I'm going to add these little veins in the middle of the leaves. And I might add a big one in my branches as well. Not sure yet, I'm gonna try it real quick. Yeah, that's fine. And the last little thing I'm going to do here is just select all of my layers and resize my piece here because it's a little bit too big for my canvas size. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller and just center everything. If you enjoyed this video and want more plenty drawing tutorials, I highly recommend you check out this playlist because I have a bunch more for you. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the weekly videos I post every Tuesday and Saturday. Then click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.